Notice it last Sunday morning, and this Sunday morning it's even more evident, and I'm talking about the exodus of people from our family here at Sunset, and that's because of the holiday season. Our university students and our Sunset School of Preaching students and many of the faculty members from the Sunset School of Preaching are all on their break, and they're taking the opportunity to be away to visit family and friends. And our public schools ended last Friday. And that means that many of our families in this congregation had the opportunity to take a trip to be with their family or to take a holiday vacation. And it's a wonderful time of the year when people can take a break from normal routine, and we're thankful for this time of the year for that. And I know this morning that for those very same reasons, we have many who are visiting with us. In fact, I've looked around the auditorium this morning, and I see many, many people whom I do not know. And we want you to know that we're thankful and grateful that you're here to worship with us at Sunset. It is a special time of the year. We're always saying that about this time of the year. But have you ever stopped to think about why it's what we call a special time of the year? What is it that makes it so special? And I thought about that for a while in the last few days, and I finally came to this conclusion. The primary reason why this time of the year seems so special is that we exhibit more unselfishness at this time of the year than at any other time. Everywhere we turn, people seem to be thinking about other people. And haven't you seen on your television or haven't you read in the newspaper stories about groups of people forming together and maybe buying toys for children? Or maybe preparing food baskets for certain people. A young woman walked into my office this last week, and she brought $108 in cash, and she said, our bunco group, and I'm not even sure what a bunco group is, but the young women in our bunco group collected this money, and they wanted to give this to some family, and we would prefer, she said, to give this to a family where the children need some extra presents at Christmas time. And I took the $108, and I had heard Nat Cooper talking in the hallway the day before, asking the question, is there any way we can get some toys for children? Apparently he and Klein had been studying with the family, working with the family, and so I took the $108 to Nat and said, here's some money for those children. And I think he solicited the help of Lamore and Harrison, and they went out and they bought the gifts for these children. It's an unselfish time of the year. And many of you have had long lists for shopping. And you've gone out from store to store searching down that list. And as you look down that list, your name's not on it. You're not looking for something for yourself. You're looking for something to please someone else. It is the time of the year when we have unselfishness. Now I'd like to begin this morning by having you to think about what might make a very best gift. Not every gift that you give this year will be a best gift. Not every gift is going to be an extra special gift, but assume for a moment that you want to buy an extra special gift and you want to present an extra special gift to someone. What does it take to make that extra special gift? One criteria is it ought to be a gift that lasts, one that endures. And again, not every gift that we give has that lasting quality to it. In fact, there are some gifts that we give and they perish so very quickly. That may be true for the toys that we buy for our children. Some of them are kind of like the Old Testament statement about the grass of the field. They're here today and they're gone tomorrow. They don't last very long. But if you want to give a gift that's extra special, you try to find one that lasts, that endures over time. And for a moment, let your mind roll through your home. Create a mental picture of your home for a moment and think about some of the things you have there that are extra special. At our house, it might be a grandfather clock, or it might be a special chair, or it could be something hanging on the wall, all of which have been gifts from very special people. And they have that quality that they last over time. So if you want to give a special gift, you find one that'll last. And if you want to give a special gift, you find one that also encourages.
one that kind of thrills, and one that keeps on encouraging. And again, I tell you that not every gift that you give encourages. This is the time of the year when we also kind of laugh and we joke about those socks, and you wonder who in the world would wear these socks, or the tie that has that peculiar design, or the shirt that doesn't fit. And I've been to at least 2 parties this year where they have these white elephant gifts. And when it finally came confirmed that I would take this particular gift home, I looked at that and I thought, who in the world would give something like this? It's not too encouraging. But it wasn't meant to be encouraging. It was meant to be a white elephant gift. But if you want to give a gift that really is special, you find one that encourages. The third criteria is not only does it last and not only does it encourage, but it's a gift that costs. It's always evident somehow that this gift involved a cost, some kind of sacrifice. And if you think back into the Old Testament about gifts that cost and that kind of idea, almost all of you will go back to the end of the life of David, for there is a remarkable story there, right at the end of his life. He's still king over Israel, and he's made a great mistake as a leader. He's done some counting when he should not have counted. And God is going to punish him for it, and he allows him to choose one of 3 punishments. And David chooses the plague, and the plague spreads over Israel, and 70,000 people die. Now, it's a wonderful lesson on leadership. A leader can sometimes make a mistake, and it costs the people so dearly. 70,000 people die, and no one knew that better than David. And David cried out to God and said, why would you kill all these innocent people when I'm the one who's made the mistake? And God, who is rich in mercy and compassion, stopped that plague. And in 2 Samuel chapter 24, the word comes to David, now you go up to a place of a man called Arana, and you take his threshing floor, and you build it into an altar, and you offer there a sacrifice. And David goes immediately, and fresh on his mind is the almighty power of God, and burned into his mind is that plague where 70,000 people died, and now the plague is stopped, and he's so grateful. And he goes to Arana, and when he comes, this man sees David coming. He says, David, why are you here? And David said, I'm going to offer a sacrifice to the Lord, and I want to buy your threshing floor. And Arana's a good man, and he loves David. And he said, David, you can have my threshing floor, and you can even have my oxen to offer as a sacrifice. And in verse 24 of 2 Samuel 24, David looked at him and said, no, I insist on buying it, for I'll not offer unto my Lord a burnt offering that costs me nothing. David knew that part of the beauty of a gift is in the cost. And so if you want to give what we call this morning a best gift, you find one that will last, and you find one that will encourage, and you find one that will cost you something. And you will be giving to someone a very, very best gift. Now, those are the same 3 criteria that make Jesus to be the best gift ever given anywhere. Because it was Jesus who came to us and was presented to us as a gift that lasts. He was there in the beginning. And then he spent some time with us here. And then he went up to be with the right hand of God, and he will forever and forever and forever be there. He keeps on lasting. And he keeps telling us that he'll never leave us. Remember when he told the apostles, I'll be with you always? He's the kind of gift that lasts. And he's the kind of gift that encourages. He's the one who said, I want to lift your burdens in this life. He is the one who stands by the Father to ever intercede for every one of us. And if you were here last Sunday night, we talked about that time when we die, when Christians die. And we saw that picture of Jesus coming in the clouds and gathering all of us together and taking us to be with him forever and forever and forever. He encourages. And our Lord Jesus Christ is that gift that costs. For in the beginning he was with God, and he was God. Same was in the beginning with God, and all things were made by him, and yet for all of us, he left that place of paradise and came to this earth and didn't even have a place to lay his head. And so Paul explains it like this and says, though he was rich, yet for our sakes he became poor, that through his poverty you and I might have great spiritual wealth. And not only did he come here, he went all the way to that cross that we think about and talk about every Sunday morning, and was nailed to that cross. And he's the one who said, greater love hath no man than this, that he would lay down his life for his friends. And so Jesus came that we might be here this morning. A very best gift that lasts, that encourages, and that costs. And now with all of that this morning, I want to kind of redirect your thinking for just a few moments. And I'd like for you to think about what we in this congregation might give to one another. What best gifts that we could give to each other right here. And what we're about to talk about will fit at your house. It'll fit with your family. But I want to talk for a moment about this family that meets here regularly. And it is a family. If you look up in your dictionary the definition of family, it'll say it's a group of people that have a common ancestry. It's a group of people that share common convictions. A group of people that have a common head. And it's in this man named Jesus that we have a common ancestry. And it's through Jesus that we share common convictions. And he is our head. We are a family of God. A family of Christ. And I'd like you to think for a moment about gifts. Best gifts. Not talking about socks or ties or shirts or radios. I'm talking about best gifts that we might be able to give one to another. And I want to read this morning in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 12 through 18. Now, those of you who have been with us on Sunday nights for several weeks now are probably wondering why I'm talking about something from 1 Thessalonians. Because you know that on Sunday nights for several weeks I've done that under the heading of Give Church Another Chance. And I'm just about to end that. In fact, this will be one of the last lessons in that series. But I'm going to do it this morning instead of this evening. And all we've been saying for weeks now is that if we would be more of what Christ called us to be, then maybe there would be people in this world who have never thought about following Jesus, who would take a look at us and say, I'd like to have that, and I'd like to be a part of that. And if we could be more of what Jesus asked us to be, then maybe there would be those people who have kind of wandered away from us. And maybe they would come to their senses and say, I made such a great mistake. I've been wrong, and I want to come back and give it all another chance. And so one more time, I'm going to say that if we could adopt what we're going to read right here and give best gifts to one another, what a difference it would make to the people round about us. 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 12 through 18. Now we ask you, brothers, to respect those who work hard among you, who are over you in the Lord and who admonish you. Hold them in the highest regard and love because of their work. Live in peace with each other. And we urge you, brothers, warn those who are idle, encourage the timid, help the weak, be patient with everyone. Make sure that nobody pays back wrong for wrong, but always try to be kind to one another and to everyone else. Be joyful always. Pray continually. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. Doesn't that sound strange? For me to be talking about best gifts and then to read something like that? And I only have a little bit of time left. I've already used most of my time this morning. But I'd like you to think for one moment about the kind of gifts that we can give to one another. And he begins in verse 12 and he says, you take those people who rule over you, even those who have to correct you from time to time, and you hold them in high respect. And you hold them in the highest regard and love because of what they do. And that's kind of a timely subject for us. And you've heard me say so many times that one of the greatest gifts you can give in a congregation is to take those leaders and love them and respect them. That's also one of the greatest gifts you can give at your house. To honor your father and your mother and to obey them and to cherish them. Do you remember last Sunday Last Sunday morning when we talked about reconfirming our existing elders, and then we added those 2 new elders, and they were all down here at the front, and when that morning assembly was over, you remember what happened? People from all over this building, from the far corners of this building, rushed down here, and they began to grab their hands and shake their hands and hug them and encourage them. And then last Sunday evening, we tried to do something like that again to give everyone an opportunity to express themselves. And so we had the elders over in this east foyer. And I went over there after the assembly was over to take a look. I wanted to try to get in line myself. And the line was so long, and people were everywhere. And it would have been far easier for you to go home. But you stayed there and waited your turn so you could embrace them and shake their hands and encourage them. And that's the kind of gift that lasts. And that is the kind of gift that encourages. And I will admit to you that it's not always easy, for these men are not perfect, and decisions are not always perfect. And sometimes they may lead in a direction you don't want to go. But one of the greatest gifts you'll ever give is to respect those who have the rule over you. And then he says, live at peace with everyone. Now listen very carefully. Do you know it is well within your power, for the most part, to give the gift of peace? In Romans chapter 12 and verse 16, Paul will say, live in harmony with each other. And in verse 18 he'll say, if it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And this gift comes kind of like this. There are times when the anger needs to be controlled. And there are times when you want to say it so badly, but you control your tongue. And there are times when you kind of swallow your pride. And there are times when you let the other one have her way, even though you really think that your way is even a little better. And what a gift you give in your family right here when you give the gift of peace. Warn the idle. You're probably thinking, well, how could that ever be a gift? A better translation is probably this: admonish the unruly. And the idea of the unruly, that's the idea of kind of stepping out of line. Have any of you done some shopping in the last few days? And did you pick up that from the shelf and go to the place where you would pay for it and find a long line? And you watch people standing in a long line, and sometimes they don't like to stand in a long line for that long of a period of time. And so they step out of line. They're going to try to find a shortcut. And there are people in the family of God who once in a while get out of line. And we know that when they get out of line, they're walking in that territory of destruction. And one of the greatest gifts you'll ever give is to take someone out of line and move them back in that line that leads to heaven. And it's a gift that'll last. And it's a gift that'll encourage. And yes, it'll cost you something, because it's not easy to talk to people like that and bring them back into line. And he goes ahead and says things like, you encourage the timid and help the weak. The word timid there probably means faint-hearted or to lose heart. If you let me tie those two things together for a moment, what happens is that sometimes under all the pressures of life, we get a little weak. And we begin to lose heart, or maybe I could use the word intimidated. Do any of you like to be intimidated? I never like to be intimidated. That's why I kind of want to withdraw to a corner, and I don't want anyone to see me, and I don't want to say anything. And there are some people in this life who have become so pressured by it that they're intimidated by it. And they're withdrawn, and they want to leave it. And one of the greatest things you can do in your family is to help those people and to encourage them. And then give the gift of patience. Be patient with one another and with everyone else. You be patient. I don't like to preach about patience. Some of you know the reason why. Some of you are just like me. You have what they call now a type A personality, and you're always kind of in a hurry, and you kind of always want things done, and you want it done right. And when things don't get done right, you kind of wonder why they didn't get done right. Do you like to live with people like that? Those people can be hard to live with. And what we need to understand is that things don't always have to be done just right. And all of us make our mistakes. And we need to give room for those mistakes. And we need to be more tolerant. And we need to learn how to give the gift of patience. And don't retaliate. We naturally like to do that. Slap and we slap back, hateful word and we give it back. He said, don't you do that. In Romans chapter 12, he said, you leave room for God to work in that. Instead of retaliating, you give the gift of kindness, and you give the kind smile, and you use the kind word. And if your enemy, he says in Romans chapter 12, is hungry, you do what? You feed him. If he's thirsty, you do what? You give him something to drink. You be kind. Now pause for one moment and think about what family would be like. Even right here, what family would be like if we started giving those kind of gifts continually. Kindness instead of retaliation, a gift of patience, the kind of gift where we help and we encourage and we help people continually get back in line as they're pulled out of line by Satan, and we give the gift of peace, and we respect those who have the rule over us. I just described one of the most beautiful families that you could ever find any place. But let me give you the last three very quickly. He says, be joyful always, pray continually, and give thanks in every circumstance, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. I was talking about what we ought to be this morning. We ought to be joy-filled. And yet so many of us have our joy based on the circumstances that are around us. And so we wake up like we have for the last several mornings, and we look outside, and it's drizzling, and the sun is not shining. And so many of us base the mood for the day on what we see through our window every morning. Or we look at what happens to us in the first few moments of the waking hours, and that determines how we're going to be all day long. And so we go up and down in life like a roller coaster at Six Flags because of the circumstances. And maybe one of the greatest challenges for your life and my life is to learn how to be joy-filled regardless of the circumstances. And to wake up every morning, rain or shine, and say, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And he says, you pray continually. That's not talking about walking around 24 hours a day and mumbling some kind of word. That's talking about having a right relationship with God, so right that you talk to him frequently on all occasions. So that if I have this little trouble during the day, I can pause in that very moment and talk to him about my little trouble. Or I can walk outside and see the sun breaking through the clouds, and it's so beautiful, and I can talk to him and praise him for the beauty and thank him for the break in the clouds. And he says, you be thankful in every circumstance. It's kind of what I said about joy. Circumstances will not always go right for you. They may more often go wrong than they go right. And yet our God promised us a long time ago that he would work in every circumstance for the good of his people. And so I can look at any situation, every circumstance, and I can say there's some good in that, and I'm going to be the kind of person that doesn't whine and gripe. I'm going to be the kind of person that finds the good. Now think for a moment. If you had someone at your house who was joy-filled, who would pray like that continually, and who would find the good in every circumstance and be thankful for it, wouldn't that be a wonderful person to have at your house? And what would happen this morning if in the Sunset Church of Christ we would give those kind of gifts to one another? I'll tell you what would happen. There would be people in this world who would begin to want more and more of what we have. Because let me give you a little secret if you haven't thought about it for a while. In this world, they don't give gifts like that. In this world, they don't exchange the gift of joy like you and I do. They don't give the gift of thanksgiving. They don't give the gift of prayer. They don't give the gift of kindness. They don't give the gift of encouragement. They don't give the gift of peace. In this world, they don't give the gift of respecting those who have the rule over them. And if we give those gifts, people everywhere will begin to look and say, I want to be in a place where people exchange those gifts all year long. And so this morning, at a special time of the year, a special time of unselfishness, when best gifts come in the form of those that last and those that encourage and those that cost, I want to challenge you to begin to give those gifts. And I know if anyone or all of our elders were standing here this morning, they would plead with you to give those kind of gifts one to another. And though it doesn't really fit with what I've said, I want to close with this song that has been selected. And if there's someone in this auditorium this morning that wants to respond, prayer request, place membership with this great church, be baptized into Jesus Christ, we'd love to have you this morning while we stand and while we sing.